My name is Olivia Bennett, and at 35 years old, I truly believed I had it all. A loving husband named Ethan, 7 years of marriage, a stunning home in Pacific Heights, and millions of dollars invested in his booming tech company. But everything changed last Tuesday night. I overheard Ethan speaking in Spanish with his business partner, plotting to get rid of me while draining our accounts. What Ethan never realized was that I speak fluent Spanish. And because of that, his empire will never be the same. If you're watching this, let me know where you're from and hit that like and subscribe button, because I'm about to tell you how I took back what was mine. Before my world came crashing down, I was living what most people would call the American dream. I graduated from Harvard with an MBA and quickly built a career as a financial consultant for Silicon Valley tech startups. My sharp eye for potential and my ability to analyze emerging technologies made me one of the most sought-after advisors in the industry. I was independent, successful, and deeply fulfilled by my work. That all changed 8 years ago at a tech conference in San Francisco, where I met Ethan Mitchell. I was representing a client. He was showcasing his young company, Tech Vista, a small but promising software startup specializing in artificial intelligence and data analytics. Our eyes met across the crowded hall, and there was an instant spark I had never felt before. Ethan was 38 at the time, tall, dark-eyed, with a presence that drew everyone in. Born to Mexican immigrants, he had the perfect mix of drive and charm. When he spoke about his vision to transform businesses with technology, his passion was magnetic. I lingered at his booth long after my meeting was supposed to end. We exchanged business cards. He called me the very next day. Our first date was at a cozy Spanish restaurant in the Mission District. I still remember how confidently he ordered for us in perfect Spanish, impressing me with both his culture and his ease. That night, we stayed until the restaurant closed, talking about everything from market trends to our favorite books. The intellectual connection between us felt rare and precious. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Weekend trips to wine country, late nights talking strategy, and countless moments where I felt like I'd found someone who understood both my mind and my heart. After 6 months, Ethan proposed during a sunset sail on the San Francisco Bay. The ring was a family heirloom, a stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds. Our wedding was a dream, a vineyard in Napa Valley. 300 guests including Silicon Valley elites, me in a custom Vera Wang gown and Ethan in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. When we exchanged vows, I believed with all my heart that we'd build our empire side by side. At the time, Tech Vista was still fighting to find its place in the competitive tech world. Ethan had bold ideas but little capital. After many late-night discussions about our future, I decided to invest in his vision. I put in $2 million from my family inheritance and savings, nearly everything I had, to help Tech Vista grow. With that money, Ethan hired top talent, upgraded infrastructure, and sped up product development. It was a huge risk, but I trusted Ethan. We agreed I'd hold a stake in the company and have a say in major decisions. With the success that followed, we bought our dream home in Pacific Heights, a stunning 4,000-square-foot Victorian with panoramic views of the San Francisco Bay. It cost $3.5 million, but at the time it felt like an investment in our shared future. We spent months renovating it, making it perfect for entertaining. Those early years were magical. We traveled, 2 weeks in the Maldives for our first anniversary, the Italian countryside the next year, then the temples of Japan. Ethan was attentive and romantic, surprising me with thoughtful gifts and elaborate date nights, even as the company demanded more of his time. Eventually, I left my consulting career to become Tech Vista's CFO. It made sense. Ethan would handle vision and product while I managed the finances. We were true partners, or so I believed. Ethan valued my opinions, consulted me on decisions, and we worked through challenges together. When disagreements came up, we found compromises that felt fair. He was the kind of husband who showed love through actions, remembering little details, supporting my friendships and hobbies, making time for us despite his packed schedule. On our 5th anniversary, he whisked me away to New York for a weekend, and surprised me with tickets to the Broadway shows I'd been dreaming of. Under our combined leadership, Tech Vista exploded in value. Within 5 years, the company's worth had soared to $50 million. We had thriving offices in San Francisco, Boston, and Austin, staffed by more than 100 talented employees. Our clients included major Fortune 500 companies that depended on our software for data analysis and business intelligence. Soon, the financial press began featuring Ethan as a rising star in tech, and investors rushed to get involved. When our company reached a $50 million valuation, we threw a lavish celebration for our employees and investors. I stood beside Ethan as he delivered a heartfelt speech, thanking everyone for their contributions. My chest swelled with pride at what we had built together. He publicly acknowledged my role in the company's growth, raising a toast to his brilliant wife, without whom, he said, none of it would have been possible. The applause washed over us, and I believed every word. Our home soon became a hub for networking events and dinner parties with potential investors and clients. I enjoyed playing hostess, using these gatherings to strengthen relationships while showcasing the success we'd worked so hard for. Ethan and I were seen as a true power couple in the tech world. Our skills different but complementary, our vision united. Life seemed perfect. I had a thriving career, a devoted husband, a beautiful home, and a future brimming with promise. Never once did I imagine that cracks were quietly forming beneath the surface of everything we'd built. The first signs of trouble appeared so subtly, I almost overlooked them. About 6 months ago, Ethan began shifting his schedule in ways that seemed harmless at first. Board meetings ran late. Client dinners stretched well into the night. Weekend work sessions grew more frequent. None of these changes seemed serious on their own, but together they created a pattern, one that slowly gave me less access to my husband. He began holding more closed-door meetings, abruptly ending calls when I walked into his home office. He installed a new passcode on his work laptop, something he'd never done before. When I asked about the changes, he brushed them off as increased security measures for sensitive contracts. Around this time, a new figure entered our lives. Julian Ortiz, a 40-year-old entrepreneur from Colombia with deep connections across Latin America, began appearing regularly at Tech Vista events. Ethan introduced him as a potential partner who could help expand our business into South American markets. Julian had a commanding presence, expensive tastes, and a network of contacts that impressed even our most seasoned investors. Ethan and Julian quickly developed a close relationship. They spent long hours discussing strategy, often slipping into Spanish when conversations became more detailed. Julian began joining us for dinner at home, arriving with expensive bottles of wine and charming stories of his international ventures. On the surface, he seemed like an invaluable addition to our circle. With Julian came Gabriela Suarez, a striking 28-year-old marketing executive introduced as his associate. She began attending company functions, always impeccably dressed and often positioned near Ethan during important conversations. I noticed how her hand lingered on his arm when they spoke, how she laughed a little too eagerly at his jokes. The atmosphere in our home began to shift. Ethan started taking calls in private, speaking in hushed Spanish whenever I was nearby. What he didn't know was that I was fluent. I had studied Spanish for 4 years in college and spent a year abroad in Barcelona. Ethan and I had always communicated in English, so my fluency had simply never come up. When I asked about the sudden secrecy, Ethan explained that the company's expansion into Latin America required private Spanish conversations. On the surface, the explanation was logical, especially with Julian's involvement. But something about it unsettled me. Why was I suddenly being excluded from discussions I'd always been a part of? Gradually, I was removed from key meetings at Tech Vista. Ethan suggested I focus on current operations while he and Julian handled the expansion plans. On paper, it made sense. In reality, it was a sharp break from how we'd always run the company together. When I pressed for more involvement, Ethan assured me he only wanted to spare me the stress of launching in a new market. Meanwhile, he began scrutinizing company expenses more closely, questioning purchases he'd previously approved without hesitation. Even our personal finances became a source of tension. He suggested we postpone renovating our kitchen, saying we needed to save money for the business expansion. This, from a man who had never hesitated to spend freely on our home before. Small disagreements began to spark over financial choices that would once have been routine. When I proposed hiring a new financial analyst for my department, Ethan resisted, claiming the position could wait. And when I questioned the frequency of his business trips to Miami and Mexico City, he grew defensive, accusing me of not supporting the company's growth. During this time, I stumbled across a series of text messages on Ethan's phone that immediately raised red flags. They were from Gabriella, often sent late at night, discussing meetings that weren't on any official calendar. One message read, "Can't wait to finalize everything. It will be worth all the secrecy." When I casually mentioned seeing a text from Gabriella, Ethan quickly brushed it off, explaining that she was working on a surprise product launch, then swiftly changed the subject. I tried to rationalize my growing unease. Ethan was under pressure with the expansion. The secrecy was just business strategy. The late nights were necessary for growth. I repeated these reassurances to myself, refusing to acknowledge the darker possibilities lurking at the edge of my mind. I confided some of my worries to my best friend, Rachel Adams, careful not to sound paranoid or accusatory. Rachel Adams had known both of us since before we married and had always been supportive of our relationship. Even she noticed the change in Ethan's behavior during a dinner we all shared. "He seems distracted," she observed. "He checked his phone 17 times during appetizers alone." Rachel Adams gently urged me to speak openly with Ethan about my concerns. But something stopped me, perhaps fear of what I might uncover, or maybe hope this was just a passing phase. So I chose to wait, to watch quietly, maintaining an appearance of normalcy while gathering my own impressions. The changes in our personal relationship were just as unsettling. Ethan and I had always been affectionate, but he began to pull away from my touch. Our intimacy grew less frequent, with him often claiming exhaustion from work. Morning coffees, once a cherished ritual, became a rushed exit with a travel mug in hand. Weekend brunches were replaced by his sudden need to be at the office. I began to feel like a stranger in my own marriage, uncertain of my place both personally and professionally. The woman who once confidently managed million-dollar portfolios now doubted her own instincts. Was I overreacting? Was this simply the natural evolution of a marriage centered on business? Or was something more sinister unfolding right before my eyes? The night that changed everything began innocently enough. Ethan had arranged a dinner party at our home for Julian and several potential investors from Mexico City. I spent the day preparing, ordering catering from an upscale restaurant and arranging fresh flowers throughout the house. I wanted everything to be perfect, perhaps subconsciously hoping a successful evening might restore some sense of normalcy to our strained relationship. I wore a navy blue dress Ethan had once admired, styled my hair in loose waves, and applied my makeup carefully. Part of me was still trying to reclaim the connection we were losing, even as another part grew increasingly suspicious of his behavior. Guests began arriving at 7. Julian was among the first, accompanied by Gabriella, who wore a fitted red dress that drew every eye in the room. She air-kissed my cheeks, her perfume lingering as she said, "Olivia, thank you for opening your beautiful home to us," smiling with eyes that never quite matched the warmth of her words. Throughout the evening, I played the perfect hostess, refilling wine glasses, facilitating conversations, while discreetly observing the dynamics. Ethan and Julian frequently separated from the main group, whispering in corners, conversations halting abruptly when others approached. Gabriella stayed close to Ethan, touching his arm when she laughed, leaning in unnecessarily close when speaking to him. I felt like an outsider in my own home, watching a performance where everyone knew their lines except me. The investors from Mexico City appeared impressed with whatever Ethan and Julian were presenting, nodding and exchanging knowing glances. By 11, most guests had left, leaving only Julian and Gabriella lingering over after-dinner drinks. Ethan suggested I head upstairs, saying he needed to finalize details with them about the Mexico City office. His tone was cool and dismissive, making it clear my presence wasn't required or wanted. Reluctantly, I went upstairs. But sleep didn't come. I lay awake, listening to the low murmur of voices below. Around midnight, I finally heard Julian and Gabriella leave. I waited another 30 minutes before finally heading downstairs for a glass of water, assuming Ethan had already gone up to bed. As I descended the stairs, a thin strip of light glowed beneath the door of his home office. Faint voices drifted into the hallway. Curious, I moved closer, careful to avoid the one creaky floorboard near the office entrance. The door was slightly ajar, just enough for me to hear without being seen. Ethan and Julian hadn't left after all. They were speaking rapidly in Spanish, their tones urgent and conspiratorial. I froze, straining to catch every word, my heart hammering in my chest as the meaning of their conversation became clear. "The accounts in Panama are ready," Julian was saying. "Once the last contracts are signed, we'll start moving the assets through the shell companies. The paperwork lists Olivia as the one authorizing everything." "And you're sure it can't be traced back to us?" Ethan asked, his voice uncharacteristically tense. "The documentation is flawless. By the time anyone notices, the money will be untouchable," Julian assured him. "Your wife trusts you completely." "She has no idea," my stomach dropped. I pressed myself closer to the door. They spoke of specific sums. $3 million from the operating account, $5 million from the investment fund, my own stake valued at $12 million. All of it about to vanish into a maze of offshore accounts. "So Olivia goes to Paris on Tuesday." "Perfect. She won't know a thing until it's too late," Julian said, satisfaction dripping from his voice. Ethan's reply chilled me to the bone. "When she returns, everything will be finalized. I'll file for divorce and her shares will be worthless. The company's valuation will plummet after the accidental discovery of accounting irregularities." Such a shame the CFO was so careless. They were planning to frame me for financial misconduct while stripping the company bare. The betrayal was so deliberate, so calculated, that I had to press my hand against the wall to steady myself. "And Gabriella? She knows her role?" Julian asked. Ethan gave a soft laugh. "She's more than ready. The supportive girlfriend helping me through a difficult divorce. The penthouse in Miami is already in her name," they went on, discussing transaction schedules, complicit board members, and how they'd handle legal challenges. Every word was another knife twisting deeper into my chest. The man I loved, the man I'd built a life with, was plotting to destroy me. I stood frozen outside that door as the full weight of his betrayal crashed over me. 7 years of marriage, $2 million of my own money invested, countless hours building Tech Vista into a thriving company, all about to be stolen by the person I trusted most. My body reacted before my mind could. My chest tightened. My vision tunneled, darkness creeping at the edges. Sweat broke out on my forehead while chills raced down my spine. This wasn't heartbreak. This was devastation. Somehow I managed to slip away without being noticed, retreating silently upstairs. I locked our bedroom door and finally let the tears come, muffling my sobs into a pillow so Ethan wouldn't hear when he came to bed. My mind spun through the past 6 months, replaying every odd behavior, every secretive call, every unexplained absence. One by one, the pieces slid into place with horrifying clarity. Ethan had been plotting this from the moment Julian entered our lives. I thought of the money I had poured into Tech Vista, my family inheritance representing generations of sacrifice, my personal savings from years of consulting. I thought of our home, built under the illusion of a shared future. I thought of the employees whose livelihoods depended on the company, unaware they were pawns in this scheme. As the hours crept by, shock and despair hardened into something else. A cold, clear anger took root, bringing with it a steely determination I'd never felt before. Ethan had underestimated me. He saw only the trusting wife, the supportive partner. He had no idea what I was capable of when betrayed. By dawn, I had cried my last tear. My eyes were swollen, my throat raw, but my mind was razor sharp. Ethan had made a single fatal mistake in his perfect plan. He didn't know that I understood every word of his Spanish conversation with Julian, and that oversight would be his undoing. I heard Ethan stirring in the guest room where he'd apparently slept. Soon, he would come to tell me about my Paris trip, playing the part of the caring husband while silently counting down the hours until he could execute his scheme. I splashed cold water on my face, hiding the traces of my sleepless night beneath a careful layer of makeup, and prepared for the performance of my life. The rules had changed. Ethan thought sending me away would let him destroy everything we built. Instead, he was handing me the perfect chance to save it all. At 7:30, Ethan walked into our bedroom, freshly showered and dressed in the charcoal suit I'd given him for his birthday. His smile was warm, too warm, as he sat on the edge of the bed beside me. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, leaning in to kiss my forehead. "I have exciting news. The Paris office needs someone senior to review their operations next week. I thought you might enjoy a few days there. Your flight's booked for Tuesday morning." I widened my eyes, playing the part of surprise and delight. "Paris? That sounds wonderful. How long would I be there?" "About a week," he replied, scrolling through his phone calendar. "The company apartment is free and you love the left bank in spring." I touched his arm with practiced affection, swallowing my revulsion. "That's so thoughtful of you. I'll start packing today." Ethan seemed pleased, unaware I already knew every detail of his plan. "I've got meetings all day, but we'll celebrate at dinner tonight," he said, standing to leave. "Love you." "Love you too," I answered, the words turning to ash in my mouth. The moment the front door shut behind him, I sprang into action. First, I called Sophia Reynolds, my old college roommate, now a partner at one of San Francisco's top corporate law firms. "Sophia, I need your help." "It's an emergency," I said when she answered. "Can you meet me somewhere private right away?" Her response was instant. "My office in 1 hour. Use the private elevator from the garage." "Is everything okay?" "No, but it will be," I replied, already moving to get dressed. Before leaving, I swept through our home office. Ethan was careful, but I searched anyway, hoping for proof of what I'd overheard. In his desk drawer, I found a key I'd never seen before. On a hunch, I tried it in the safe hidden behind the painting, one I knew existed but had never accessed. Inside was a folder marked Meridian Holdings, a company in Panama. Alongside it lay papers with my forged signature authorizing transfers of Tech Vista intellectual property. Heart pounding, I photographed everything, then put the documents back exactly as I'd found them and rushed to meet Sophia. In her office, I laid out everything, the subtle changes in Ethan's behavior, the sudden presence of Julian and Gabriella in our lives, and most importantly, the conversation I'd overheard. Sophia listened silently, her expression darkening. "This is serious, Olivia," she said when I finished. "They're planning corporate theft on a massive scale, possibly securities fraud, and definitely identity theft with those forged signatures. We need to move quickly but carefully." She immediately began outlining legal strategies, what evidence to secure, which authorities to involve. As she spoke, a sense of control crept back over me. I wasn't helpless. I had resources, knowledge, and now a plan. My next call was to Logan Mitchell, Tech Vista's chief operating officer, whom I'd personally hired 3 years earlier. Logan had always been my ally. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop far from the office, away from curious eyes. He was visibly shaken as I told him what I'd found. "I noticed Ethan had been excluding you from meetings," he admitted. "But I never imagined this. Julian always made me uneasy. I thought I was just being paranoid." Together, we accessed Tech Vista's financial records on his laptop. The past 6 months revealed subtle irregularities, millions in consulting fees to unknown companies, suspiciously large expenditures labeled business development, and transfers to vague subsidiaries. "These are their shell companies," Logan said, pointing to transactions in Panama and the Cayman Islands. "If I had to guess, they've already moved close to $4 million. Armed with this information, I returned to Sophia's office. We worked late into the night, preparing documentation for an emergency board meeting and drafting motions to freeze company assets if needed. Sophia also connected me with a forensic accountant to trace the money trail. "What about your personal accounts?" she asked. "If Ethan has access, you need to secure them immediately." The next morning, I opened new accounts at a different bank, transferred my funds, and cut off Ethan's access to my remaining assets. I was grateful I had maintained some financial independence during our marriage, with investments held solely in my name. The next critical step was to build support among TechVista's board of directors. The board had 7 members, including Ethan and me. If I wanted to block his plan, I needed at least 3 of the remaining 5 members on my side. I began with Janet Wilson, a venture capitalist and one of our earliest, most loyal investors. We met for lunch at her club, where I carefully laid out the evidence I had uncovered. "I always thought you two were the perfect couple," she murmured, shaking her head in disbelief. "But these numbers don't lie. Count me in, Olivia. What Ethan is planning won't just harm you. It will destroy the company so many people have worked to build." One by one, I met with the other board members, revealing only what was necessary to secure their backing without alerting Ethan. By Sunday evening, I had 4 of the 7 votes needed to remove him as CEO if it came to that. Meanwhile, I had hired a private investigator to follow Ethan and Gabriella. Within 48 hours, he sent me photos of them entering and leaving an apartment in Pacific Heights, proof their relationship had crossed far beyond professional boundaries. The pain of that confirmation was sharp, but it fueled my determination. This was no longer just about saving my company or my financial stake. It was about justice, about ensuring Ethan would not profit from his betrayal. Throughout these frantic days of preparation, I kept up an image of normalcy at home. I packed for Paris, made dinner reservations at our favorite restaurants, and responded to Ethan's affection with convincing warmth. Every moment was an act of self-control. Every smile a performance. The stress was crushing. I lost 5 pounds in 4 days, barely eating as I worked day and night to counter his plan. Sleep came only in short bursts, my mind racing with details that needed attention. Yet under the exhaustion and anxiety, a quiet strength was growing. I was fighting back. I was reclaiming what was mine. On Monday night, our last evening before my supposed trip, Ethan took me to Gary Danko, the same restaurant where we had celebrated our first anniversary. He ordered champagne, toasting to our success and our future together. He gave me a platinum bracelet, saying it was a gift to remember him by while I was in Paris. I accepted it with the gratitude he expected, knowing full well it wasn't a token of love but a final payoff, the last gift before his betrayal. The irony burned inside me. "I'll miss you," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "It will be a busy week here, but I'll be counting the days until you return." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "I have a feeling this trip will change everything for us." Ethan nodded, hearing what he wanted to hear, never suspecting the truth behind my words. "I believe you're right about that," he replied, raising his glass once more. That night, as we lay in bed together for what would be the final time, I stared at the ceiling, thinking about how we had arrived here. How had the man I once loved so deeply become capable of such a calculated betrayal? Had he ever truly loved me, or had I been nothing more than a stepping stone to his ambitions? There were no satisfying answers. What mattered now was not the past, but the future I would build from the ashes of this marriage. As Ethan drifted to sleep beside me, I vowed that tomorrow would mark the beginning of that new life. In the early hours, the last pieces of my plan fell into place. Logan confirmed the emergency board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m., exactly when Ethan and Julian planned to sign their final agreements. Sophia had all the legal documents ready. The forensic accountant had traced the money and identified the accounts to be frozen. Everything was prepared. The stage was set. All that remained was for Ethan to drive me to the airport, believing he was sending me away while he executed his scheme. Instead, he was about to face the consequences of underestimating the woman he had married. Tuesday morning arrived with a surreal calm. I finished packing a suitcase of clothes I would never wear in Paris, carefully choosing instead the outfit for the board meeting later that day. Ethan stood in the doorway, checking his watch, barely hiding his impatience to get me to the airport and start his plan. "Do you have your passport?" he asked, his faux concern for my travel masking his true intentions. "Right here," I replied, patting my handbag with the air of an eager traveler. "All my documents are on my phone." Ethan loaded my luggage into his Audi, chatting about Parisian cafes and suggesting neighborhoods to explore in my free time. His performance was flawless, down to reminders about the time difference for our calls. He had clearly rehearsed this moment, sending off a wife who would return to find her life in ruins. The drive to San Francisco International Airport was filled with ordinary conversation. Ethan asked about my meetings in Paris, offering tips for presenting our financial models to the French team. He had no idea this would be the last drive we would ever take together as husband and wife. I nodded, jotting down notes, pretending to play along with this carefully staged act, even as my heart raced with anticipation for what lay ahead. At the departures terminal, Ethan pulled up to the curb and stepped out to grab my luggage. He hugged me tightly, kissing me with what looked like real affection. "Have a safe flight, my love. Call me when you land." "I will," I promised, returning his kiss. "Good luck with your meetings this week." For just an instant, something flickered across his face. Guilt, hesitation, maybe both. But it vanished almost as quickly as it came. He stood there watching until I stepped inside the terminal before driving away, no doubt already dialing Julian to confirm that phase 1 of their plan had succeeded. What Ethan didn't know was that Sophia was waiting just inside. As soon as his car disappeared from view, I turned and headed toward the airport parking garage instead of the security checkpoint. I had no intention of boarding any plane today. He bought it completely, I told Sophia as we walked briskly to her car. "Perfect," she replied. Logan just texted. Ethan went straight back to the office and is with Julian now. They don't have a clue what's about to happen. We drove to Sophia's office, where we had set up a command center of sorts. 2 additional attorneys from her firm, a forensic accountant, and Logan were already waiting for us, surrounded by laptops and stacks of documents. "The board members are all confirmed for 2 Logan reported. Ethan has scheduled his own meeting with the Mexican investors at 3, obviously planning to present them with a done deal once the assets are transferred. Timing was everything. We needed the board to vote before Ethan could complete his transactions, but not so early that he would be warned and rush his plan. Everything hinged on precise execution. While we waited, I combed through the mountain of evidence we had gathered over the past 5 days. The forensic accountant had documented $4.7 million in transfers to shell companies in Panama. The private investigator had produced photographs of Ethan and Gabriella entering the penthouse apartment purchased with company funds. Logan had uncovered emails between Ethan and Julian outlining their scheme, dating back 14 months earlier than I had ever imagined. The most devastating discovery was that Ethan had been undermining my position at the company for over a year, quietly spreading misinformation about my decisions to board members and investors. He had been preparing to pin financial misconduct on me long before I noticed any change in his behavior. He planned this down to the last detail, the forensic accountant remarked, pointing to a timeline of suspicious activities. If you hadn't overheard that conversation, he probably would have pulled it off. The realization that Ethan's betrayal stretched so far back hit like another blow to my already splintered heart. Our anniversaries, the gifts, the romantic getaways, all had been happening while he plotted against me. The depth of his deception was almost beyond comprehension. At 1:30, we gathered our materials and headed to TechVista's offices. Logan had arranged for us to slip in through a side entrance, avoiding the main reception where we might be spotted. We set up in a small conference room adjacent to the main boardroom, waiting for the right moment. Through the wall, we could hear Ethan and Julian greeting board members with easy confidence, completely unaware of the storm about to hit. Their voices rose animatedly as they talked about new opportunities and market growth. no doubt laying the groundwork for the announcements they were planning to make. At precisely 2Y, Janet Wilson, our ally on the board, called the meeting to order. Ethan launched into his prepared remarks about the extraordinary growth potential for TechVista in Latin America. He spoke of strategic partnerships, innovative technologies, and unprecoliviated returns on investment. But just as he reached the section about the financial restructuring needed for this expansion, Janet cut him off. Before we continue, I believe we have some additional attendees who should be present for this discussion. That was our cue. Logan opened the connecting door, and our team filed into the boardroom. The look on Ethan's face as he saw me will stay with me forever, a mix of shock, confusion, and the first flickers of fear. "Olivia," he stammered, quickly trying to recover. "What are you doing here? Your flight?" I smiled calmly, setting my portfolio on the table. "I decided this meeting was more important than Paris. Please continue. I'm particularly interested in the financial restructuring you were about to discuss." Julian had gone pale, his eyes darting between Ethan and me, clearly calculating how much I knew and what danger I posed. Ethan tried to regain his footing, his tone turning patronizing. "Olivia, this is a complex strategic discussion. We can catch you up later. Perhaps you should rest after your canceled flight." Janet stepped in firmly. "Actually, Ethan, Olivia requested this emergency board meeting to address serious concerns about the company's finances and leadership. As chairperson, I granted that request." Ethan glanced around the room, finally realizing control was slipping from his grasp. What is this about? If there are concerns, I should have been informed beforehand. The same way I was informed about the $3 million transferred to Meridian Holdings in Panama? I replied, my voice steady. I steadied my voice, even as adrenaline surged through me, remembering how I had been informed about the plan to devalue my shares while I was supposedly in Paris. The color drained from Ethan's face. Julian stood abruptly, gathering his papers. "This appears to be a personal matter between you two. Perhaps we should reschedule the business discussion." "Sit down, Mr. Ortiz," Sophia commanded, her lawyer persona in full force. "Your involvement in this matter is well documented. Attempting to leave now could be seen as a sign of guilt." Julian sank slowly back into his chair, exchanging a panicked glance with Ethan. Around us, the other board members looked confused and concerned, waiting for an explanation. I opened my portfolio and began handing out documents to each person at the table. "What you have before you," I said evenly, "is evidence of a systematic scheme to defraud TechVista of its assets, transfer intellectual property to shell companies, and leave the original company an empty husk, all while setting me up to take the blame." For the next 45 minutes, I presented our findings with the precision and clarity honed over years as a financial consultant. The forensic accountant laid out a detailed analysis of the suspicious transactions. Logan explained the operational changes designed to exclude me from decision-making. Sophia outlined the legal implications of forged documents bearing my signature. Ethan tried repeatedly to interrupt, each excuse more desperate than the last. "This is a misunderstanding. These were preliminary explorations, temporary measures for tax purposes, but the evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable." When I played a legally obtained recording of a phone call between Ethan and Julian discussing how they would frame me for financial misconduct, his final defense collapsed. The recording had come from a source inside Julian's organization, someone disturbed by the ethical implications of their plan. "I think we've heard enough," Janet said as the presentation concluded. As chairperson, I call for an immediate vote on the temporary removal of Ethan Mitchell as Chief Executive Officer, pending a full investigation. The vote was unanimous, with Ethan abstaining. My vote wasn't even needed for the majority. Security personnel were called to escort Ethan and Julian from the building, their access to company systems immediately revoked. As they were let out, Ethan turned to me, his expression a mix of rage and disbelief. "You set me up. You planned this all along." I met his gaze steadily. "No, Ethan, I simply learned from the best. You taught me everything I needed to know about betrayal." With Ethan and Julian removed, the board quickly turned to the urgent task of stabilizing the company. I was named interim CEO, with Logan as COO and expanded authority. Emergency measures were implemented to freeze suspicious accounts and secure company assets. A press statement was drafted to calm the market once the news became public. The meeting stretched late into the evening as we mapped out strategies to minimize damage and reassure employees, clients, and investors. Through it all, I kept my composure, focusing on solutions rather than the personal devastation roiling beneath the surface. It was nearly midnight when I finally returned home, a home that now felt like a museum of lies and broken promises. I walked through the silent rooms, brushing my fingers over photographs from happier times, wondering if any of it had been real. In our bedroom, I began removing Ethan's belongings from closets and drawers, packing them into boxes with mechanical efficiency. Each item carried memories now tainted by betrayal. The watch I'd given him for his birthday, the sweater he'd worn on our trip to Napa, the cufflinks I'd added to his collection each Christmas. As I worked, the weight of the day caught up with me. I sank to the floor, surrounded by the remnants of our life together, and allowed myself to truly feel the loss, not just of the husband I thought I had, but of the future we had planned, the trust I had given so completely, and the love I had believed was real. But beneath the grief was something else, a fierce pride in what I had accomplished in just 5 days. I had faced ultimate betrayal and responded not as a helpless victim, but with strategic precision. I had saved the company, protected our employees' livelihoods, and reclaimed my professional standing. Ethan had underestimated me in the most fundamental way. He had seen me as an accessory to his success rather than a capable, intelligent woman in my own right. That miscalculation had been his downfall. As dawn broke over San Francisco, I showered and prepared for my first day as TechVista's CEO. Challenges lay ahead: legal battles, rebuilding trust within the organization, establishing new leadership. But for the first time since overhearing that fateful conversation in Spanish, I felt ready to face whatever came next. Ethan had sent me to Paris to dismantle everything we had built. Instead, he had given me the chance to save it and discover my own strength in the process. 1 week after the emergency board meeting, we scheduled a company-wide assembly to address the dramatic leadership changes at TechVista. Rumors had been swirling despite our best efforts to manage the narrative. Employees were understandably worried about their jobs, the company's stability, and what these changes meant for their futures. On the morning of the assembly, I arrived at the office early to prepare. The past week had been a whirlwind, securing company assets, meeting key clients to reassure them, and working with law enforcement on the criminal aspects of Ethan and Julian's activities. I had barely slept, surviving on coffee and adrenaline while rebuilding what they had tried to destroy. Logan met me in my new office, now relocated to the executive suite once occupied by Ethan. "The legal team just called," he reported. "Ethan is demanding a meeting. His lawyer claims he has documents that will clear his name." I had been expecting this. Ethan was not someone who accepted defeat easily. "Tell them we'll meet tomorrow at Sophia's office with all legal representatives present," I said. "Today is about reassuring our team." The company assembly was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the large conference center on the ground floor of our building. As employees began filing in, I could feel the tension and uncertainty in the room. These were people whose livelihoods depended on TechVista, people I had worked alongside for years, who had no part in the executive-level betrayal, but would suffer the consequences if we failed to stabilize the company. I stepped onto the stage precisely on time, flanked by Logan and the remaining executive team. The room fell silent as I approached the microphone. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady despite my nerves. "Thank you all for being here. I know there have been many questions about the recent changes in leadership, and you deserve honest answers. For the next 30 minutes, I outlined what had happened in broad strokes, carefully avoiding details that could compromise the ongoing legal investigation. I explained that financial irregularities had been uncovered, that the board had acted decisively to protect the company, and that I had been appointed interim CEO to guide Tech Vista through this transition. "I want to assure you that your jobs are secure," I emphasized, watching relief wash over many faces. "Our company remains financially strong. Our client relationships are stable, and our products continue to lead the market. This is a challenging moment, but it is also an opportunity to recommit to the values of integrity and innovation that have always defined Tech Vista." I opened the floor for questions, addressing each one with transparency and confidence. When an engineer asked about Ethan's whereabouts, I simply stated he was no longer with the company and that legal proceedings were underway. When concerns arose about the company's reputation, I shared our communication strategy for rebuilding trust with clients and investors. By the end of the assembly, the mood had shifted from anxiety to cautious optimism. Determination replaced fear in the expressions of team members as they returned to their departments. We had weathered the first major test of this new chapter. The following day brought the confrontation I had both dreaded and anticipated. Ethan and his attorney arrived at Sophia's office precisely at 9 m, both dressed in impeccable suits, projecting an image of confident professionals rather than accused conspirators. Ethan barely glanced at me as they entered the conference room where Sophia, our forensic accountant, and 2 additional attorneys from her firm waited. I sat at the head of the table, a position that visibly irritated Ethan. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting," Ethan's attorney began. "My client believes there have been serious misunderstandings leading to these accusations. We have documentation that provides context for the transactions in question." He slid a folder across the table. Sophia intercepted it, reviewing the contents briefly before passing it to me. Inside were elaborately crafted explanations for each suspicious transaction, framing them as legitimate business expenses related to the Latin American expansion. "These are creative interpretations," I commented, closing the folder. "Unfortunately, they contradict the recorded conversations between your client and Julian Ortiz, in which they explicitly discuss moving assets to avoid detection and leaving the company. What was it you said?" "A worthless shell." Ethan leaned forward, his composed facade cracking. "Those recordings were taken out of context. This is corporate espionage, an invasion of privacy." "The recordings were legally obtained," Sophia countered. "And the context is clear, especially when combined with the forged documents bearing Olivia's signature and the falsified board approvals." For 2 hours, the meeting continued in this vein, with Ethan and his attorney trying various strategies to explain away the evidence. As their arguments grew increasingly desperate, I watched Ethan with a strange sense of detachment. This man who had once been at the center of my world now seemed like a stranger, his familiar features animated by an ambition and deceit I had been blind to for years. Finally, Ethan's attorney requested a brief private consultation with his client. When they returned, their approach had shifted. "My client is willing to consider a settlement," the attorney proposed. "He will relinquish all claims to Tech Vista in exchange for a financial package and mutual non-disclosure agreements." Sophia and I exchanged glances. We had anticipated this pivot and were prepared. "We are not interested in a settlement at this time," Sophia responded. "The board has authorized full cooperation with law enforcement regarding the attempted fraud, money laundering, and identity theft. Those investigations will proceed regardless of any civil agreements." Ethan's face darkened with anger. "You're making a mistake, Olivia. You can't run Tech Vista without me. The investors trust me, not you. The clients came because of my relationships." It was the first time he had addressed me directly. I met his gaze without flinching. "That may have been true once, Ethan, but things change. The board has full confidence in my leadership. Our major clients have all confirmed they will continue working with us. And the investors—" I paused just long enough for the words to land. "They prefer a CEO who does not embezzle company funds." This wasn't over. He shot up from his chair, his voice a threat. "You have no idea what you're up against." I stayed seated, my calm composure now a shield I'd perfected. "Actually, I do. I'm facing a man who so completely underestimated his wife that he never even realized she spoke Spanish. A man who thought she'd quietly board a plane while he stole everything she built. That's not a particularly intimidating opponent. Ethan stormed out, his attorney scrambling behind him with mumbled apologies. When the door clicked shut, I exhaled slowly, releasing the tension I'd carried throughout the confrontation. "You handled that perfectly," Sophia said, her hand firm on my shoulder. "He came expecting to intimidate you, and you turned the tables." The weeks that followed were a blur of legal action. Criminal charges hit Ethan and Julian for wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Gabriella was named as an accessory. Civil suits began to recover the stolen funds. Immigration authorities stepped in because of the international reach of the scheme. Through it all, I poured my energy into rebuilding Tech Vista. I overhauled our financial controls to close every vulnerability. I personally met with our largest clients to restore their trust. I worked with the board to craft a strategy for the company's future under my leadership. 3 months after that confrontation, the board removed interim from my CEO title, officially recognizing both my role in saving Tech Vista and my vision for its future. We marked the moment with a modest but meaningful office celebration, nothing like Ethan's extravagant parties, but far more authentic. As I raised a glass to toast the team, my reflection in the window caught my eye. I barely recognized the woman staring back, stronger, more confident, finally free of needing anyone's approval. In trying to destroy me, Ethan had forced me to discover strengths I never knew I had. The final confrontation came 6 months after that night. I overheard the Spanish conversation that changed everything. Ethan took a plea deal to avoid a long trial. I attended his sentencing, needing to close this chapter. He looked small in his standard-issue jumpsuit, the charismatic entrepreneur, now a convicted felon. When invited to speak, he turned to me. "I underestimated you," he said quietly. "That was my greatest mistake." The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison. As he was led away, our eyes met one last time. There was no love left, no trace of the connection we once shared, only a reluctant respect from a man bested at his own game. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. I answered briefly, emphasizing that Tech Vista had emerged stronger and more transparent. "Any message for your ex-husband?" one called as I turned to leave. I paused. "Just this," I said. "Gracias por la lección." Thank you for the lessons. As I walked away from the courthouse, the final weight of the past lifted from my shoulders. Ethan was facing the consequences. Tech Vista was thriving under my leadership. And I was finally, completely free of the man who had taught me the most painful and valuable lessons of my life. 1 year has passed since I left that courthouse, closing the last chapter of my marriage to Ethan. Tech Vista hasn't just survived the scandal, it's flourished. Our valuation has climbed to $70 million. We've opened offices in Toronto and London, with a client list featuring some of the world's most prestigious companies. The road here wasn't smooth. After Ethan's arrest, media scrutiny was intense. Business publications dissected every detail of the scandal. Competitors tried to poach our clients during the chaos. Some investors doubted we could recover. Those first months demanded every ounce of my determination. There were nights I came home to an empty house after 16-hour days, too exhausted to eat, wondering if rebuilding was even worth it. The emotional toll was brutal. Grief would strike mid-meeting, forcing me to retreat to my office to collect myself. The divorce itself was mercifully straightforward. Ethan's incarceration and overwhelming evidence of his crimes left the court no doubt about the ultimate breach of fiduciary duty. I retained our home and all my Tech Vista shares, though the property felt too big, too full of memories. 6 months after the sentencing, I sold our Pacific Heights house and bought a smaller, sunlit apartment overlooking the bay. Downsizing proved unexpectedly healing. Choosing what to keep and what to release felt like shedding strands of a web that had bound me. Recovery wasn't quick or linear. I worked with a therapist specializing in betrayal trauma, gradually unpacking the storm of emotions. Anger came first, clarifying, burning anger that sometimes woke me at night. Then grief for the future I'd planned and the love I'd believed was real. And shame, Shame for not seeing the signs sooner. My therapist helped me understand that the shame was misplaced. Most unexpectedly, forgiveness found its way into my life. Not for Ethan's sake, but for my own. Holding on to anger drained the energy I needed to rebuild my life and my company. I came to understand that forgiving him didn't mean excusing his behavior or minimizing its damage. It meant refusing to let his betrayal shape my future or consume my spirit. My relationships with others deepened in ways I never imagined. Through this ordeal, Sophia, Logan, and Rachel Adams became my unwavering support system. Even in my darkest moments, our shared fight against Ethan's scheme forged bonds that rose above ordinary friendship, connections, built on unshakable trust and mutual respect. I also discovered a passion for helping other women who had endured similar betrayals. 6 months ago, I founded the Financial Empowerment Foundation, offering resources and legal aid to women whose partners used financial manipulation as a weapon of control. Already, the foundation has helped 27 women reclaim their independence and rebuild their lives. My personal life has begun to bloom again, though not in the ways I expected. I met John, a literature professor, at a charity event 8 months ago. Our relationship grows slowly, marked by honesty and transparency, qualities that feel both foreign and essential after my experience with Ethan. John understands my hesitation to fully trust and respects the boundaries I've set as we grow closer. The most profound change, though, has been within me. The woman who once tied her worth to a successful marriage has been replaced by someone who recognizes her own inherent value. I no longer need external validation to feel complete or capable. Betrayal burned away that dependency, leaving behind a strength I never knew I had. Tech Vista, too, has undergone a transformation that mirrors my own. We've implemented unprecoliviated financial transparency with independent audits and clear reporting structures. Our culture now centers on ethical business practices, whistleblower protections, and open communication at every level. Ethan remains in federal prison, serving his 8-year sentence. 6 months ago, I received a letter from him filled with justifications thinly disguised as apologies. I never replied. Some chapters are best left closed. Some conversations simply aren't worth having. His perspective no longer matters to me. Just last week, I was invited to speak at the Women in Technology Summit, sharing my experience of rebuilding after betrayal. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces turned toward me with interest and respect, I felt a deep sense of completion. The story that once threatened to destroy me had become a source of wisdom I could pass on. The greatest lesson I shared with the audience wasn't about business strategies or financial safeguards, though those matter. The most powerful insight was this: our worst moments can reveal our greatest strengths. When everything I thought I knew collapsed, I uncovered abilities I never realized I possessed. I told them how this journey taught me to trust my instincts, to value transparency in all relationships, and to understand that true security doesn't come from relying on others, but from knowing you can survive even when that trust is broken. Ethan thought he was taking everything from me. In reality, he gave me the chance to discover who I truly am without him. That knowledge is mine forever. The standing ovation that followed was gratifying, but even more meaningful were the women who lined up afterward to share their own stories of resilience and renewal. In connecting with them, I realized my pain had given me a voice to express universal truths about recovery and rebirth. As I look ahead, both personally and professionally, I no longer fear the unknown. I've weathered the worst storm of my life and emerged not only intact, but stronger and wiser. The betrayal that could have defined me has become just one chapter in a much longer story, one I continue to write on my own terms. The Spanish conversation I overheard that night set events in motion that completely changed my life. Though I'd never have chosen this path of pain and rebuilding, I can't deny it led me to a place of greater authenticity and self-awareness than I might ever have reached otherwise. Perhaps that is the ultimate irony of Ethan's betrayal. In trying to strip me of power, he sparked my discovery of a strength I didn't know I possessed. In trying to leave me with nothing, He gave me the freedom to rebuild everything on a stronger foundation. Have you ever faced a betrayal that ultimately made you stronger? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. If this journey resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of resilience and transformation. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in our deepest challenges. Until next time, this is Olivia signing off, wishing you the strength to overcome whatever obstacles life puts in your path.